Is this the addition to the Amouage summer lineup that we were all waiting for? Let's find out. I'm very, very excited. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Off, and I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is an unboxing and very first sniff, very first impressions on the new 2025 Amouage release, Decision. As you already know, and that is because I keep repeating it constantly, I'm a giant Amouage fanboy. Amouage is pretty much my favorite perfume brand. It's the house that really got me into perfumery, for real. Yes, I started out with Tom Ford, with Ombre Leather, very common, I think, but Amouage with Interlude Women was the house that really just opened my mind to niche perfumery, to very artistic, luxurious, deep, dense, very rich and thought-provoking perfumery at that. I'll never stop talking about the Interlude family of perfumes, and specifically Interlude 53, which is my favorite fragrance ever. And every time Amouage comes out with a brand new release, something that is not necessarily an extract version of a product already on the market, I'm super excited. And when they announced Decision in existence, my interest was definitely piqued, although I wouldn't necessarily have called myself ecstatic. And that was due to the fact that they chose Quentin Bisch as the perfumer, and he is not necessarily my favorite artist out there. And although one of the more popular perfumers on today's market, Quentin Bisch is known for his very recognizable signature, his very identifiable DNA, which basically permeates all of his fragrances on the market today. And it just so happens that a lot of his creations are incredibly commercial, they're incredibly mass appealing, they're very synthetic smelling, they're very young smelling, and that is not something that necessarily works well with Amouage. And I do know that Quentin Bisch has worked really well for Amouage in terms of sales. I seem to understand that one of the best sellers for Amouage in recent years has been Guidance, and that is actually one of the reasons why they so quickly put out an extract version in Guidance 46. Quentin Bisch also worked for Amouage on other products, namely Purpose and the X-ray version Purpose 50. I do happen to like those fragrances, but they really play to Quentin Bisch's strengths. They have this gritty, pungent, synthetic, metallic aspect to them, which makes them not only insanely long-lasting, but they're a little bit gritty, they're a little bit edgy. You can also find this synthetic, artificial, sort of screechy, metallic aspect in other of Quentin Bisch's fragrances, namely Ganymede by Marc-Antoine Barrois. Again, that is one of the fragrances where this aspect, this signature works extremely well because it really emphasizes the futuristic, modern aspect of the fragrance itself. But again, this is not a characteristic that I would associate to every fragrance, especially it's a little bit weird on Amouage. Amouage, at least in my opinion and in my experience, is more of a brand known for their high quality materials, exclusive ingredients, and just overall exceptional blend. And although some of the fragrances can come across as edgy, they're all beautifully smooth and very well put together. And I feel that that buff, aggressive vibe that Quentin Bisch brings to the table doesn't necessarily always fit the narrative here. So you might be asking yourself, why on earth am I even holding a box of Decision? And to that, I have to say that I'm an Amouage fanboy, as I said before, and I pre-ordered this fragrance as soon as it launched on the 14th. I'm actually surprised that this got delivered only today because Amouage is usually very quick in delivery, but I put in my order, I got an order confirmation right away, they assigned a DHL number to the shipping, and then I waited. And it basically took them, I think about over a week to actually ship the thing. The actual delivery process is pretty quick, especially considering that these fragrances come from Oman. One nice thing that Amouage does is that they cover the import duties and taxes. That feels luxurious, I always applaud it. Again, it might not necessarily apply to you, but in Switzerland, it's a huge pain in the ass to deal with, and I'm really happy that they do this. Together with my box of Decision, I got my usual Amouage complimentary sample, which you get with every order. This time I got Love Delight Woman because I've never smelled it and I heard it's quite interesting. I have to say that for such a luxurious house and for such an expensive product, getting only one sample with your order is a little bit disappointing. Amouage, you can definitely do better than this. But going back to Decision and my reason of purchase, I got this because this, at least on paper, seems to have the potential to be a very interesting summer fragrance for Amouage. And Amouage doesn't really have many. I have Beach Hut Man, which is clearly my favorite, but A lot of the scents are actually really dark and deep, and they're not necessarily wearable in the hotter months. So this one here, reading the notes, reading the story behind it, seemed to be quite interesting, and an interesting take maybe on a summer vibe. According to a preview article found on Vogue Arabi, apparently the inspiration for Decision was a trip that Renaud Salmon, the creative director for Amouage, took to this mountain in Oman, Jebel Shams. And venturing up the mountain, his attention was grabbed by these dry juniper trees. Juniper is actually one of my favorite type of trees. It's actually one of my favorite type of woods. It's very, very popular in Sardinia. Has this dark, dry, silvery bark. It's cracked, it's salty, it's very, very rough and edgy. I really like the feeling of it. Juniper berries are actually an ingredient very much used in perfume to give this very fresh gin-like feel. And it seems by the nose that this fragrance is supposed to be offering juniper berries for the added freshness, a little bit of citrus, maybe some woods, maybe even juniper wood, maybe cedar wood, and then a deep background of vanilla. On paper, it sounds interesting. Again, it sounds fresh, and it could have some potential. I'm thinking a little bit along the lines of something like MFK's Gentle Fluidity Silver. For whatever reason, that one also offers juniper berries up top for a very fresh gin feeling, but the base of that is very synthetic. It's very ambroxany, and I'm not a huge fan. I do recognize the utility of the fragrance. I do recognize that it's good. It's just not my style. So I'm really hoping that this comes across as a little bit smoother, a little bit more natural smelling. Looking at the box right now, I forgot to mention that within the inspiration for the fragrance, there's also lightning bolts. And these lightning bolts apparently strike juniper trees, just drawing them out and just basically sterilizing them. Let's just quickly read the brief behind the box here. It says, starting with an olfactory bolt of lightning, Decision banishes the darkness of uncertainty, an effect achieved through the combination of the cool woodiness and citrus metallic sparkle of frankincense, bergamot, myrrh, and juniper berries. After the striking opening, the light spreads further, aided by the gleaming sheen of the Atlas cedarwood. Finally, a warm vanilla in the base conveys a profoundly liberating effect of acceptance. Uncompromising, distinctive, and incandescent, Decision captures the paradox that lies at the core of all of life's most powerful decisions. It focuses on its goal while remaining open to countless possibilities. Alright, I like to write up. The brief is always very poetic. Amouage is generally very good with names and just general imagery. Decision as a name comes across as very direct, very edgy, basically black or white. I'm super curious to smell this, so let's crack this open and let's give it a sniff. Amouage presentation is always amazing. I really like to look at these boxes. They're so clean, they're so modern, they're so luxurious feeling. I really applaud this about the brand. I really like these new boxes, although I am still kind of partial to the old design that would just open from the top. So we have the typical sleeve. Even inside of the sleeve, there's an extension of the design that is found up top, which is basically this burnt wood, kind of like lightning bolt struck wood. Very interesting. Okay, let's see what this bottle looks like. The box is always amazing, as usual. Holy crap, this bottle almost fell out. All right, so it looks exactly like it looks like in the pictures. For some reason, I was really hoping to have a satin bottle. Some of the pictures kind of gave the illusion that it could have been a satin finish. That would have been really cool, really amazing. I do appreciate satin. They're very fingerprint resistant. But this color here is actually quite interesting. And given the fact that it's so light, so white, you can barely see any fingerprints, so not too bad there. The bottle looks great. It's your typical Amouage style, typical Amouage shape. The glass is absolutely pristine with no visible seams. Again, this is a luxurious product. There's no surprises here. It's your typical Amouage. The cap is also, once again, typical Amouage, magnetic. It feels exactly the same. Let's get to spraying the thing because I'm really curious. I decided to spray this on strip also because given the fact that it's potentially a summer fragrance, it could be very light and very fresh. It could be a good candidate to spray on a shirt or something like that. And also I wanted to see if there's any sort of difference between the strip and the skin version. I'll be spraying it on skin right after though. All right, I'm going in completely blind. Let's see what this is all about. This is way darker than I was expecting. I was expecting something very fresh, very citrusy, very zingy, with the typical gin juniper note there, but this is not that. I'm really surprised. This is definitely not your typical summer freshie. The most prominent note to me is actually the vanilla. It's very easy to detect. It's very, very prominent, very in your face. It's a combination of this soft, not overly sweet vanilla with this woodiness. This is basically the scent on a first impression. There's a tiny bit of minty, herbaceous freshness, which is maybe given by the juniper berries, but it's very much in the background. This is pretty much a warm, woody vanilla. This is completely different from my expectations. I was expecting something zingy, fresh, bitter, energetic, very much lightning bolt-like. This is much more of a warm blanket sort of feeling. Wow. This will need a lot of time to compute here. Wow. I do have to say something though, and maybe I'm being biased, maybe I'm being overly protective, maybe I'm preparing for the worst, but it does smell like Quentin Bisch. It smells a little bit synthetic, it smells a little bit metallic. There's something about this vanilla note which is, I don't know, it's ringy, it has this tuning fork sort of ring to it. All right, enough with the strip, let's go on skin. Hopefully I can pick up a little bit more. 3 good sprays. I really want to go all in on this. Let's give it a moment. So far, I'm a little bit disappointed. I have to say, I have to be completely honest. I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm not blown away. But maybe this is one of those grower scents. Maybe it comes alive the more you wear it. It's not as exciting as I thought it would be. Amouage is a very exciting brand. It has a lot of energy. It has a lot of edginess. And even in the more tame, mass appealing fragrances, there are these facets which really have me applauding the creativity of the house, the creativity of the perfumer. This initially is a little bit lacking. Yeah, the synthetic metallicness of the vanilla is very much apparent, even more apparent on skin. It's even more dry. It feels like a dry, not a dry wood, but it feels like a dry compound. This is very, very strange. And by the way, it smells absolutely nothing like Gentle Fluted Silver by MFK. That one is much brighter. The thing that they might have in common is this air conditioning sort of syntheticness. Because this one here has that Quentin Bisch DNA. It smells a little bit like a magazine cover. It smells a little bit artificial in a way. It's also incredibly subtle. It's not a powerful scent. There's no real note that emerges. This vanilla is basically covering everything, and there's this synthetic, again, tuning fork ring to it. There's not much woodiness. Maybe the woodiness is giving this a little bit more warmth, a little bit more texture to it, but it's not much. And the citruses up top, the juniper berry, are basically non-existent. They might be aiding to this slight bitterness of the scent, but it's far, far from being what I was expecting. It's far from being a very energetic, zingy, citrusy blast to the face. I genuinely was expecting some sort of a fresh day starter, something that you would just put on your face and just go about your day feeling super energized. This is much more of a subtle sillage, metallic cloud around you. Very, very strange. Very, I don't know, very, I feel disappointed because again, this does not smell like an Amouage. This is probably the furthest Amouage has gone from their signature, from their DNA. This does not smell like their creation. It smells super modern. It's quite interesting. I'll definitely give it a lot more wears, but it's not necessarily something that I was expecting, not the route that I was expecting to go to. This smells very unusual. It smells modern, it smells a little bit synthetic, it smells like a laboratory setting, it smells clinical. Maybe they were actually going for that. Maybe they wanted to replicate the idea of this juniper berry tree struck by lightning, basically sterilized, dried down, out there in the open, out there in the elements, basically stripping it of every tree-like facet it had. This became a more fossilized tree. It feels like a tree sculpture rather than an actual tree. Very, very strange. I'll definitely wear this a lot to see what this is about, and I'll come back with my full review once I'm accustomed to the scent profile. Again, I'm a little bit disappointed. I was expecting something a lot more punchy, something a lot more characterful and artful. I don't really get much image except for this incredibly clinical environment. I'm not really sure how to conclude this video except for an incredibly strong, very strong sample first, because this has the high potential to be something that is not what you were expecting it to be. At least that was my experience. At the very least, it's a very interesting take on Amouage. It's a very strong departure from the brand. I'll be wearing this a lot, wearing it outside, putting it through the paces, and coming back with a full review when I feel comfortable about it. So far, okay, I'm a little bit disappointed, but hey, it might grow on me. See you in the next one. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's always massively appreciated. Many more videos to come as per usual. See you on the next one and cheers.